Welcome to Rebel Speak and Be Encouraged. And today I'm looking at Jeremiah 24. And I'm thinking about when we hold on to things that we need to let go of. And I don't know about you, but part of discerning, right? Spiritual discerning and growing, part of the ways we grow is that there's sometimes God has us hold on to things for dear life. to be faithful, to keep praying or believing in hope, not a chore. I think if sometimes our heart, I think it was T.D. Jakes once I heard like years ago, but talk about how our spirit and our heart can be really near, and sometimes our heart is really awakened, and we have to kind of distance a little bit. That would be true, less so now, but where I really was feeling something and then it would just kind of, my heart kept taking over, and you can kind of lay it down, right? So sometimes there's things we lay down, like, okay, God, I really know you're faithful to me, and I don't have to pick this up because when I pick it up, there's a snake in the story of Moses, where he picks up a snake and it becomes this amazing rod that he can do miracles with. But kind of for me, I can pick up something that turns into a snake and consumes me. And when I'm in that mode, so there's different types of relationship we can be with the yearnings of our heart and desire. And sometimes in my life, I've just had to kind of let something sit and know that God's faithful to me, and I'm not quite capable, right? If you're right arm, the image in the New Testament is like kind of, if something's your right arm's causing you to sin, like you just can't behave, you're going to cut it off. And not literal, but there's been times in my life where I've had to say, yeah, I kind of, God, I want to see this, but I entrust it to you. I give this spiritual child to you because something in me kind of gets out of balance quick. So that's part of my journey. And then there's things where God's actually really saying, I want you to hang in on this in prayer. I want you to guard this in prayer. And if it's a place that God's asking me to guard in prayer, there's a lot of joy, all right? There's a lot of joy. Like, even if it looks opposite of what I'm praying and saying, there's so much joy as I pray it that I'm convinced that I'm there's something so good and right? There's something so good and right. I'm echoing God's heart, and it's a joy and a privilege. And I get to partner in prayer. That's a joy and a privilege. I get to speak life maybe over situations and circumstances that don't look like they have life right now, but God's at work in them. And that's something where there's an honoring of what I feel in my spirit to be a joyous honoring of being in a difficult situation or place. And then there's just kind of that obedience, and that's what I want to talk about today. Nimble obedience. Nimble obedience, where we're responsive. And it's not magic. I'm not reading tea leaves. My spirit is just working with God, and sometimes I'm walking away from things that are familiar. Sometimes I'm walking into situations that are unfamiliar. There's a responsiveness. And what I wanted to say today is that sometimes, like in the story of when the people are leaving Egypt, and they get over the Red Sea, and they're in the wilderness, they don't have food, and God gives them this food called manna, and it shows up every day because God's so faithful. But you can imagine, you've been in the wilderness before the manna came. There were some food issues. I think there's a new word for food issues. I can't think of it right now, but fear about food, which I'm sure when you don't have food, it's scary. It's scary. So they have kind of a fear over their food, and so then God says you can't keep this manna, because knitted into the story is trust, but also is God's design to show God's faithfulness. But some people hide some of that manna, and it's full of mold, and I think worms, but it's full of mold, I know that. Like it doesn't keep. And sometimes we're in situations with God where God's having us trust God, okay? And Scripture says this: God is the author and the perfecter of our faith, which means that I'm not on a tightrope walk. Like, how well are you doing? You're failing. No, it's not like that. And I'm not also a Twister game. The other day I was thinking about that. And if you don't know Twister, that's okay. It's like the different colored circles, and it's like right hand red and left hand yellow and right foot green and left foot blue. And all of a sudden you're with a bunch of people and you're distorted and you're trying to hold your ground and it's really uncomfortable. And I think sometimes our spiritual journey can feel that way, like, God, this is beyond my comfort zone. But there's some things you want to remind yourself, that God won't let you fall. That when you're seeking obedience, you can make mistakes and you'll learn from them, okay? You'll learn from them. Even if you're wired pretty stubborn and you have to unlearn the same mistake several times, there's this faithfulness. When we're saying yes to God, God's not distancing himself from us. There's that expression, throwing yourself under the bus, or throwing others under the bus. I think that's a weird expression. Like, I don't know, it just seems weird, but it's when someone wants to look good so they, I don't know, make another look bad. God never does that. He's not afraid of what he looks like in your company. He's not afraid of what you're not getting it right says about God. He cares about you and your journey. Okay, so that's my long segue into chapter 24. Because in chapter 24, the last of the northern kingdom disappeared a long time ago, and now the southern kingdom is under the leadership of Babylon. And the privileged people have been sent out. They've gone into exile, they're gone. And then what was left of Jerusalem was given to King Zedekiah. And the word Zedekiah means righteousness. And so Babylon's put him, he's meant to thrive there. They're meant to thrive, even though they don't look like what they once did. It's meant to go well for them there. But he betrays, King Zedekiah looks to other nations. He rebels against the king of Babylon. Not wise, okay? And he's contracted, maybe I'll say. I'm not always good at exact words. He's made a deal with the king of Babylon, and now he's betraying the deal. And it's not okay with God. Not okay with God. And so we're going to see that King Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon. Okay, so here's our players in this short little chapter, King Nebuchadnezzar. And I'll just read it. After King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon exiled Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim, that's the king of Judah. So there was Jehoiakim followed by Jehoiakim, and that king is kicked out, like with all the other privileged people, he is sent to Babylon, along with the princes, the rulers, the leaders of Judah, and all the skilled craftsmen. Okay, now they were sent out, and in the book of Isaiah, if you watch Isaiah Meandering, they were told you're going to be sent out. The privileged people have not been good leaders. They're going to get sent out first, and they get sent out. Okay. They're sent out to Babylon, along with the princes of Judah and all the skilled craftsmen. The Lord gave me this vision. Jeremiah, I saw 2 baskets of figs placed in front of the Lord's temple in Jerusalem. So he's in front of the temple in Jerusalem. One basket was filled with fresh, ripe figs, which are delicious, I want to say, while the other filled with figs that were spoiled and so rotten they could not be eaten. Glad not to know what that tastes like. Okay. Then the Lord said to me, what do you see, Jeremiah? I replied, figs, some very good, some very fresh, others very bad. And the Lord gave me this message. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. The good figs represent the exiles, those who I sent from Judah to the land of the Babylonians. The people that were sent out in exile are flourishing. They're doing well there. I have sent them into captivity for their own good. And here we're going to hear what God's going to do there. I will build them up and not tear them down. Okay, they're in a place where you wouldn't think they'd be built up, but I'm going to build them up there. I'm not going to tear them down. I will plant them and not uproot them. I will give them hearts that will recognize me as the Lord. That's never worked in all that while in the land of Israel. But God's saying, no, in Babylon, I'm going to do something so precious. They are going to have hearts that recognize me. Woo, that's a joyous thing. They're going to have hearts to see me. That's Yahweh. Wow, this is what's going to happen in that land. They will be my people, and I will be their God, for they will return to me wholeheartedly. This thing that all the pleading and all the prophets pleading and all this time couldn't make happen is going to happen in the land of Babylon. And it's a joyous thing. It's a joyous thing for God. It's a joyous thing for the people. They're going to be well established. Even as they're in a foreign land, even as things aren't familiar, there's something that God's going to uniquely do in their heart that's going to be better than it was. better than it was in Israel, with the temple right there in their midst. But the rotten figs, the Lord said, represent King Zedekiah of Judah. And that's the king that when Jehoiakim was sent out, I think it's a cousin, but I'm very bad at information like that. But this other person is put in as king. Now this king, Zedekiah, who should be righteous, of Judah, his officials, all the people left in Jerusalem, and those who live in Egypt, because they're trying to make a deal with Egypt, okay? They're trying to align themselves. They're trying to get out of, they don't want to be under the thumb of Babylon. They want freedom as they understand freedom. They want to negotiate, that's what I want to say. They want to negotiate a deal of freedom on their own terms. They're not willing to live within the lines that God's kind of drawn them around them. Like here, you're permitted to do all you want, but you're going to be kind of contained in this place for a while. They're not willing to live by that containment. I will treat them like spoiled figs. How do you treat spoiled figs? How do you treat figs too rotten to eat? I will make them an object of horror and evil to every nation on earth. I do want to say that I do think that in the Old Testament you do meet this hyperbole that's just in extremes, and it's part of the writing style of the day, and it can be kind of confusing. I will make them an object of horror and evil to every nation on earth. They will be disgraced and mocked, taunted and cursed wherever I send them. They will not get away from what they've chosen. Their choosing to do evil will mark their life in a way that everywhere they go, they'll be seen for the rot that they've become. I will send war, famine, and disease until they have vanished from the land of Israel, which I gave to them and their ancestors. So it ends on this super, super, super harsh note. But the ones that were sent out, the ones that God dealt with first. See, there's a lot with Zedekiah that God's trying to work. God, for Jeremiah, it's probably one of my very favorite books in the Bible. But Jeremiah works so hard. But the people have always been told, no, this land's yours. It's promised to you. They've got plenty of prophets that back that up, right? They've got words saying, no, God's going to back you up. Of course, this is your land. It was given to you. No one else gets to have it. And God's saying something really different. Surrender. Go where you don't want to go. Because you're going to find me in new ways there. You're going to find me. Have courage. Take courage. This is a word for me today. Take courage. Go in some directions you weren't planning on. You didn't see around the next corner, the next bend. You never in a million years thought that's where and how your storyline would unfold. But in those places, as I direct you, if you follow as I lead, as I direct you, if you're willing to go that distance, if you're willing to go into those new places that will surprise you, you are going to be a people, you're going to know my heart in a new way, right? And that's my be encouraged. That's my be encouraged to you this November 28th. My be encouraged to you is that however and wherever God is leading you, we say these things so, I don't know, for me, God is good. That's a real thing. And God doesn't, I want to say this to you, God doesn't say you have to sing when you're in sorrow. God doesn't say you have to say white is black or red is purple or green is pink. That's not, God's not like that. But God is saying, if you can trust me in the ways I'm leading you and the provision I'm providing for you as I lead you in this time, in some ways that might be disgruntling, are requiring a lot of courage from you, for whatever reasons. We don't have to justify things that require courage. We just know, whoo, this is requiring some courage from me. And you say, God, because you say so. Okay, right? They fished all night because you say so. I get those stories mixed up too, because there's several of them. But okay, because you say so. Because I feel in my heart. I could justify. See, there's enough old voices that say, no, this land is yours. I could justify that's what, when I first was praying for this, we can hold on sometimes so tightly for dear life to that which is familiar and say, no, God told me this would be this way. And there's this thing, and God's like, let go. You're going to be all right. You're going to be more than all right. You're going to flourish in the new land I have for you. And I'm going to prosper you. You're going to be planted well. It's temporary, their time in Babylon. It might not feel temporary, so I'm hesitant to use that word, but it's what's that, ways and means? It's a way, it's a mean. It's the ways and means. God's at good work in your life. God is for you. I want to validate that. God values you. You are of deep value. God's not disgruntled. He's not casting you off because he doesn't care about you. But God might be calling you into some things, and you're like, oh, I want to hold on. It's like, where you hold on, that's going to turn into rotten figs. It's going to be overripe. It's not going to be good to eat. But if you can let go, and if you can trust, and you can resist the devil and resist the voices that affirm you in that thing where if you were to be really honest at the depth of your heart, and be like, God's telling me to move on. God's telling me to let go. If you can do that, and you get to that place that God has for you, it's all the good things said in Jeremiah 24, all that fresh, delicious, vibrant, bright, flavorful life God has for you there. You're going to know God, and you're going to have that heart for God. That's not just how you behave. How well are you behaving? It's going to be like, no, my heart runs. It delights. Woo! I delight in you, God, effortlessly. I've landed well, and the joy of the Lord is my strength. Be encouraged.